Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Now I'd like to call up to the podium Peter Covler, who, among many things, is a major donor of the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee, but he's also the director of the Marjorie Covler Fund and founder of the Covler Center for Victims of Torture. Mr. Covler.
Can you all hear me? It's an airport day at the memorial. If you can't, please wave or something in the background. There's always a surprise out here. Today's surprise is the activity from National Airport. By the way, this was realized by San Francisco's Larry Halprin because National Airport was the creation of Franklin Roosevelt, and we always knew that the water and the sound from the airport might become an issue. Even after 25 years of countless visits to this memorial, plus 6 preceding years of visits when this was simply one big, massive construction site, I still find it humbling to be here. How humbling as well to be at this sacred space, I use the word sacred guardedly, one equally sacred to the country, in my opinion, to the physical memorialization to the 2 other great presidents, our temple right out there to Abraham Lincoln, and our monument right out there to George Washington. Adding in the fact that we are here at this critical and existential moment, so close to the celebration of VE Day in Europe, this thing called Victory Day in Russia, so close to the current war in Europe, and just 2 days after President Biden has signed a Lend-Lease Act, obviously inspired by Franklin Roosevelt, I must add what a humbling and honor it is for me to introduce one of the most significant public servants of our time, or any time, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She has been, like the most dedicated of New Dealers and Dr. New Deal himself, irrepressibly faithful to the American people, irrepressibly faithful to an unparalleled moral and civic compass. Just let me for a moment list a little bit of what she has done and its connection to Franklin Roosevelt's inspiration or memory. In 2008, she was critical to the rescue of the American economy when we came so close, so very close, to a second Great Depression. And in case you need a refresher on what a depression or a Great Depression might mean, I suggest a little walk, it's not much, through rooms 1 and 2. That will give you at least an artist's interpretation of what life might have been like, though I suggest you read and learn more. Maybe it's a stimulation to learning more. A short time later, in 2010, she played the key role in creating the Affordable Care Act, a completion, really, I think any historian would agree, of FDR's Social Security Act. On this one, I can tell you I saw her work with my own eyes as I sat in the House gallery watching her buttonhole every wavering congressman, one wavering congressman after another. More recently, she has pleaded with us to believe in science. She believes so strongly in it, she says things like science, 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 and massive federal assistance as the way to take on the virus that has killed 1 million of our fellow citizens. Last, and without any FDR-era precedent that I can see, how courageous to take on January 6th mob that threatened her personally, threatened her staff, threatened her colleagues, threatened our democracy at the very same time. Looking ahead, thank you, Madam Speaker. Looking ahead just a little, who could doubt her upcoming leadership in taking on an extremist Supreme Court, likely even a Supreme Court as sinister as the one that FDR faced? With so many similarities to one of her heroines, Frances Perkins, she has never, ever stopped pushing us to make life better for those who find themselves in need of a hand, in need of a break, where accident, as Senator Harkin referred, makes their lives much more difficult than the rest of us who take our lives as they are for granted. But just as both the memorial and FDR himself were forced to go from New Deal priorities to war priorities, she has demonstrated the clear thinking of knowing when to reject war and when to see it is necessary. In room 3 back here, you can go back there, it's open to the public, anybody can go. FDR is quoted as saying, "I hate war." I have no doubt this is where the speaker stands, and this could not have come through more than her determined opposition to the Iraq War. I'm going to stop for a minute because that's FDR talking to us through National Airport. But like the Commander-in-Chief honored here, she also has known when war is the only possible alternative. Like FDR facing dictators in Europe and an expansionist empire in Japan, she is so very well aware that there are moments when we have to be the arsenal of democracy as is chiseled into the stone here in room 3, and that this is, forgive me, that the only way to deal with 21st century fascists, such as the current leader of Russia, is by assertiveness and war, or some kind of conflict. Last night, I got to add that she was heroic still again. It's like she's her heroism or is normalcy. When she called out Mr. Putin for being a coward, for attacking civilians and children in Ukraine. It's the first time I've heard the word coward in reference to this terrible, terrible man. About 15 years ago, I had a first chance to introduce the speaker, and I was quite proud to see that Congresswoman Anna Eshoo put those comments in the congressional record. At that time, I took a bit of a chance and said that Ms. Pelosi was our country's, in the entire country's history, our single most important speaker, surpassing the 19th century's Henry Clay and the 20th century's Sam Rayburn. Now looking back, I am confident in saying that I was actually understating her meaning to this country. In my opinion, she is now our 21st century FDR. And while her title might not be president, it might as well be. She has been our guiding star. Ladies and gentlemen.
I was telling Jonathan how embarrassing this all is. Except that I accept every kind word. I accept every kind word on behalf of my colleagues in the Congress who had the courage to support all of the things that you said. I just have the privilege of getting the credit, but they have had the courage to get the job done. Thank you so much, Peter Covler. Thank you and Judy for your leadership in making so many wonderful things possible based on values and presented with great beauty. For your long-standing leadership to preserve and promote the legacy of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, in the interest of time, I will associate myself with the remarks of so many have gone before about the beauty and the values and all the leadership of Franklin Roosevelt, but I do have some things to say, so if it looks like I'm sticking to my notes, it's because in the interest of time, because there's so much to say. But let me first say that when the Brown Education Middle School led us in the pledge to the flag, and wasn't it lovely, and thank you to your principal. Since then, since those young people led us in the pledge, we have been joined by scores of young people who have joined us here today. And I want to thank them for being here and to say that they will be taking this message of Franklin Roosevelt into the very next century. So we're so glad you're here. You're our messengers to a future we will never see, but we want you to take a message of values and patriotism and Franklin Roosevelt into the future. Indeed, I'm so happy to see all of you, and each and every one of you. Indeed, how we can ever forget this tireless mission to help organize the centennial celebration of Franklin Roosevelt's birthday in 1982. Peter Covler did that. Seems like yesterday, but and your ongoing support for the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee. You continue to ensure President Roosevelt is honored with reverence and the respect that he is due. I'm also very honored to be here with Senator Harkin, chairman of the anniversary celebration and one of the chief architects of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Tom Harkin, he talks about it here, and that's appropriate. He talks about it everywhere. He's one of these champions for people with, he talks about his brother. That was your original motivation, I think. And we've had the pleasure of welcoming him to California on time and time again. And this is always his why, his purpose. So how appropriate today that you've taken such a lead in this statue of Franklin Roosevelt in the wheelchair. Thank you, Tom Harkin, for being so wonderful. And Mary Dolan, thank you, Executive Director, thank you for your leadership and your very strong remarks. And thank you for acknowledging Elena Berger and so many others who we owe a great debt of gratitude. How about how wonderful it is to see Ambassador Pierce. She talked about the memorial to Franklin Roosevelt in the UK, and we take great pride in the statue that we have of Winston Churchill in the Capitol, right at the foot of the stairs that the British used to storm the Capitol in 1812. But our reconciliation is part of our history. It's part of our history. That was meant as a compliment. I mean, sometimes I have to interpret, I don't know. And again, James Roosevelt. Yes, it is in the DNA, not just the form of your shoulders, but in your leadership. And as you know, I have seen it firsthand for decades. And now another generation of my family sees your leadership, whether it's, again, our values, our priorities in terms of issues, or the politics to get the job done. Thank you, James. It's always wonderful. We've been friends for decades. Although he's much younger. And how nice that Tracy is here. How proud you must be. Your great-grandfather, your father. Now, let me just talk about this in a personal way. You know, as I said, there's a lot we can all say about the four freedoms and the rest. It's a lifetime of service and leadership, and for us to take pride in it. But I take a little pride because I remember fondly being here for the dedication in 1997. I did hear Senator Inouye speak those beautiful words. I was a member of the Appropriations at the time. I did serve with Claude Pepper, as my father served with him too in Congress many years before. But I have to mention another person, Sid Yates. Sid Yates, he was the chair of the Appropriations Committee while much of this was going on of Illinois, and he was my chairman there, and he, again, shared so many of Franklin Roosevelt's values, a true progressive. And I also let me say this. I brought my brother Tommy, who had been the mayor of Baltimore. My father was mayor after he was in Congress. My brother was mayor, to the dedication. He was in tears the whole time. He was in tears the whole time because he's 11 years older than I was. He got to see much more of Franklin Roosevelt. So that's one personal connection. I had the honor of voting for yes. Right around the time of the dedication was when the idea for the statue came, and then we had the vote that same year for the statue. Thank God for that. So another thing, Lawrence Halpern, thank you for mentioning that he was from San Francisco. One day, Lawrence says to me, he was my friend, he said, I want to show you something in my studio. When I went there, I saw it all before anybody. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. He said, you can't tell anybody. This is, just a secret. I said, well, I won't tell anybody, but I have to bring some other people here so that you can pledge them to secrecy too. Because this was for us. Well, one person I brought was the, don't tell anybody I told you this. One person I brought was the head of the AFL-CIO, Jack Henning in California, and for him, he was in tears to see it. So we take great pride in Lawrence Halpern's design, and then interesting to see that he had input. But isn't it wonderful, because it has places for people to sit, but more importantly, it has places for wheelchairs to sit right next to President Roosevelt. Lawrence Halpern, he was quite wonderful. Now, my father was a New Deal Democrat. He got elected in 1938, worshipped at the shrine of Franklin Roosevelt, worshipped at the shrine. And he was the first member of Congress, as chair of a subcommittee on appropriations, to have a first lady testify. Eleanor Roosevelt, I have the picture in my office, you've seen it, in the Speaker's office, of Eleanor Roosevelt testifying before the subcommittee on appropriations that dealt with St. Elizabeth's welfare hospitals and that. So the issues, and Eleanor Roosevelt's role in all of this is, of course, not to be underestimated. My father not only worshipped Franklin Roosevelt politically and governmentally and patriotically, personally, he named my older brother Franklin Delano Roosevelt D'Alessandro. There aren't too many Italians with that name. Anyway, it is fitting that we gather at this wheelchair statue, which captures the president's poise, his resilience and strength. In preparation for the memorial's dedication 25 years ago, it was a moment of great pride, again, for all of us in the Congress to cast our vote for the legislation directing the construction of this important addition. And with the wheelchair statue, our nation embraced one of the greatest truths that Franklin Roosevelt, among other things, taught us. We respect people for what they can do, not judge them for what they cannot. Congress and the country are deeply grateful to the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee, to all of you, for the work to ensure every American can visit this beautiful place. Thank you, Mr. Reinhold, for what you said earlier and the guidance you gave us, and to the Park Service for keeping it so beautiful. Indeed, it is extraordinarily moving to think of the countless children with disabilities who will visit our nation's capital and bear witness, thank you, to this great American hero in a wheelchair, And in this statue, we will not only see themselves as an integral piece of America's past, but an invaluable part of our future. Again, respecting them for what they can do. As Eleanor Roosevelt explained in the quote inscribed behind this statue, President Roosevelt's disability was part of his superpower. She said, Franklin's illness gave him strength and courage he had not had before. She said he had to think out the fundamentals of living and learn the greatest of all lessons, infinite patience and never-ending persistence. Strength, courage, patience, persistence. An all-American spirit embodied by an all-American hero who, as you all know, rescued our nation from the depths of the Great Depression, expanded the promise of economic security for a new generation, and rallied the world to confront a murderous tyrant who sought to conquer his neighbors and dismantle democracy. Indeed, in one of the nation's darkest hours, Franklin Delano Roosevelt authored a pillar of resilience, a beacon of hope to the world. At this challenging moment, we hear echoes of the grim chapter through which Franklin Roosevelt bravely shepherded our nation. Ambassador Pierce referenced this. Indeed, his tenacity and determination were crucial to securing the victory of freedom over fascism in World War II. And today, we continue to look to his historic leadership as the world engages in the battle of democracy over dictatorship in Ukraine. It is timely that on Monday, as was referenced, President Biden proudly signed our legislation reviving the Lend-Lease program. This initiative helped him turn the tide of the Second World War and will now be pivotal in supporting the people of Ukraine. Because, as Franklin Roosevelt knew then and we know now, we must never fail to confront the sinister force of oppression, because a threat to democracy anywhere is a threat to democracy everywhere. In closing, I haven't said that before, have I? Sometimes I say it twice. Except I can't turn the page. Okay. In closing, upon the enactment of the Lend-Lease Act in 1941, President Roosevelt called on the conscience of our country to join the fight for freedom. He said, "The light of democracy must be kept burning. It is not enough for us merely to trim the wick or polish the glass. The time has come when we must provide the fuel in ever-increasing amounts to keep that flame alight." Others today have called us the arsenal of democracy. That is what we are. Today, our task remains the same. And to honor FDR's legacy, it is up to each and every one of us to continue to keep the light of democracy, its precious flame aglow, not only overseas, but here at home. Indeed, God truly blessed America with the life, leadership, and legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Thank you all of the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee for all you do to preserve the stunning tribute to this titan of history. Thank you all.